GameStop is an iconic name. For many avid gamers, a sizable chunk of their adolescent life revolved around this storefront. I don't mean that in a physical sense, they didn't spend their days and weekends in the actual location, but GameStop was and is one of the most prominent brick and mortar brand names when it comes to video game sales, whether that be consoles, new releases, peripherals, almost anything. For younger gamers, that is rapidly changing, but for older gamers, the name GameStop will almost surely conjure up memories of midnight release lines, trading in used discs, and pre ordering new titles for $5 down at the counter. The thing is, those memories are dying, not just because of the natural process where memories fade away, but because the actual concept of GameStop is almost totally irrelevant now, and has fallen from grace over a period of 5 consecutive years to a point where the business is almost entirely destroyed, and executing last ditch efforts to stabilize and live on. Over 92%. That's how far the share price of GameStop has fallen since its 2015 highs. And before that, reaching a peak of over $60, it hovered in the range of 15 to 30, even during the financial crash of 2008. Now, having stripped away its dividend, failed in every conceivable metric, closed locations, and even most recently overhauled their board of directors, it seemed like a perfect time to analyze the business tragedy of GameStop, why it failed, and how the changing landscape of gaming has hung this company out to dry in a devastatingly decisive way. The core of this issue is business model, physical sales in an increasingly digital world, but that's not the only problem. It's probably the most obvious one given how rapidly the market share of digital versus physical continues to climb and the convenience offered by that format as well, but the fractures in GameStop's foundation run very deep. The closest comparison is really rather obvious: Blockbuster Video. Blockbuster Video was a brick and mortar storefront offering VHS and DVD movies to be rented or sold. It feels strange needing to say that, but with the company having been largely dead for almost a decade, there will certainly be viewers who aren't aware of what Blockbuster was. Funnily enough, there are still a few Blockbuster retail locations out there, just owned by a different company now. And the final one, as far as I know, has no plans to ever shut down, despite most likely operating at a loss and being one of the final holdfasts after almost 9,000 similar stores were shut down. So why did it go under? The answer, simply put, is technology. Where once a viewer had to physically go to a store and rent the movie they wanted to see, competitive tech companies like Netflix and Hulu emerged, which offered on-demand streaming services for a low monthly fee, right from the home, and were not predicated on charging late fees. The process by which Netflix uprooted Blockbuster's viability actually started even before streaming. At a point when DVDs were still the primary mode of entertainment viewing outside of cable, Netflix would just mail the discs to your home. And it might take some extra time, but that saved a trip to and from the Blockbuster store, with a reduction in the threat of late fees on top of that, which sadly comprised a core component of Blockbuster Video's entire viability model. Well, it was too convenient to pass up in terms of whether or not you wanted to choose Netflix over Blockbuster. The shift can be summarized as an evolution in distribution technology with an added and substantial bonus to convenience. It became a no-brainer. Blockbuster was out and streaming services, by and large, were in. Netflix, Hulu, Prime Video, MSNBC, Fox, now Disney Plus, Vudu, Sling, I don't even know all the names, and whatever the hell else is coming out. They've taken over the industry and there simply isn't room for Blockbuster. The same thing is happening right now to GameStop. A huge amount of their core business model has always operated around physical disc sales, and not just that, secondhand used disc sales. In fact, their emphasis on used game sales is so high, it has caused friction within their very own customer base. It seems convenient to go right to a GameStop and trade in your old games for whatever is newest, but their pricing was and is less than ideal. Taking an almost brand new game back in a day later that they had purchased for $60 might not even give back a third of that. And that ratio plummets even further if it's not a relevant new release. Consumers started to become very unhappy with this, not to mention developers and publishers as well. Secondhand game sales award 100% of all profit to the retail location, and none of that to the development or publishing companies. I firmly believe secondhand game sales are a wonderful thing, but more so on a peer-to-peer level, not so much under a corporate business model. Since this revenue stream is so lucrative, it was pushed from the top down by GameStop management and executive staff. To be clear, I'm not demonizing the individuals who work counters at GameStop locations, it's just what they were told to do, and it's their job, but leaked employee testimonial began to make it clear that pushing used products back out the door after trade-in was a top, very, very top priority, and that led to further increased friction with their customers. For a much more in-depth explanation of this, another YouTuber by the name Clean Prince Gaming has an excellent series about GameStop stores in which he details quite a few things about his own experiences with the company, and I'll link it down below in the description. It's a very illuminating playlist. To go even further, ex-employee testimony reveals that even the people working there believe their secondhand game sales racket, as referred to by an anonymous source during a 2012 Forbes article, would likely be illegal if the government had even a passing desire to examine it. The bottom line is that GameStop garnered a reputation as a video game pawn shop, but almost even worse, and with that negative reputation came people trying to cheat the system. As the decline began to really pick up some momentum, GameStop upped their rewards program, but each step forward was 2 steps back, as gamers would then be able to pick up games and return them in a rotation to play for free, which in turn cost the company money. But all of this was just the start. As the digital sales grew, publishers began to open their own storefronts. Why ship retail discs when you can sell a copy direct through your own platform, retain 100% of the profit, avoid physical manufacturing and shipping costs, and eliminate the disc from circulation within a secondhand shadow economy? This was a pretty big gut punch for GameStop, and now, years later, when all major AAA publishers have a fully functional online storefront, things can't really get much worse for them. Ubisoft has Uplay, EA has Origin, Bethesda even has their own awful little Bethesda launcher, but as bad as that one is for gamers, because it really is a terrible online storefront, it's even worse for GameStop. How about a different angle? As far as I've been able to tell, GameStop is not technically a franchise. This might not matter in some circumstances, but when operating over 6,000 storefronts, many of which are tightly grouped in expensive locations such as New York City, not operating a franchise model puts a tremendous amount of strain on the overarching company. Instead of having a franchise partner foot the opening cost and lease expenses, GameStop is doing it themselves, and the icing on the cake is that they mostly sell, for the largest notable sections of their revenue stream, small disc boxes that take up hardly any space. And yet they have large, very spacious leases all operated through the core company. And some of them are so close you can walk to and from different GameStop stores. That's just not good business. The rest of that space is populated with toys, knickknacks, and various gimmicks, and I was unable to obtain real data on how profitable those products truly are, but I cannot imagine it to be substantial enough to justify the entire business model and the amount of space that is dedicated to it. It's a progression we have seen time and time again. Company A sells a physical product, Company B offers it digitally, and in just a generally speaking a better way, Company A goes out of business. CD stores were uprooted by iTunes and Spotify. VHS and DVD outlets got torpedoed by Netflix and Hulu, among others. And GameStop is now getting pushed out of relevancy by all of the major publishers in a somewhat coordinated way. It's not deliberate in the sense that they all sat down and said, let's destroy GameStop, but as they sell their own products directly to consumers and eliminate a cornerstone of the GameStop business model, all at the same time in tandem, the effect is pretty much identical. The same way Blockbuster shut down a horde of locations in waves pre-bankruptcy, GameStop abruptly closed about 3% of its stores in early 2017, another 3 to 4% in late 2019, and for context, that's hundreds of locations, and another 55 right as 2020 started, just recently. It's pretty obvious that this negative growth rate will continue and more locations will be cut in the future. The GameStop era of video game sales has ended. The company has begun to operate at an annual loss even, and not a small one at that, booking a net loss of over $600 million during 2019. It has now, as of a few days ago in March 2020, appointed multiple new figures to its board of directors, such as Reggie Fils-Aimé, former president of Nintendo. This is, on a surface level, a positive step, but is it really? A board of directors appointee will not change the fact that newer, better technology exists, that the company is built upon practices that don't work anymore, and that with each passing day, their ability to turn a profit is decreasing. It's impossible to count them out completely, especially given the past accolades and success stories of their new board members, which also include a former Walmart CEO and the past PetSmart CEO as well. But without GameStop becoming something else entirely, and I truly mean a different store almost completely that operates in a totally different way, I don't see the downtrend reversing anytime soon. And when that downtrend has already caused a 90% evaporation in share price over 5 years, from all-time highs over $60 to under $4, there's not much runway left. It helps that Microsoft and Sony are about to release new console generations. In fact, it helps a lot, especially since those consoles actually do run physical discs as well, because pretty soon they won't even have that capability if this trend continues. But where once GameStop was the place to buy games, now it's just a place to buy them. A bad place to buy them. A bad place to buy them where you have to drive to the bad place to buy them, and in a world where it's increasingly centered on convenience, digital downloads, and customer value, GameStop is at a colossal disadvantage. Now, before wrapping up, I want to say one thing. I do not believe that physical disc usage dying off is a good thing. Actually, it's a pretty terrible thing for consumers on average because it gives an unreasonable amount of power to AAA publishers, which really has not gone well in the past. There are now streaming services like Google Stadia, which is even worse, which are trying to mark up game prices and sell them to you in a vacuum that might cease to exist tomorrow for all we know, so that's pretty terrible. And stepping away from physical sales is bad in a lot of different ways, but the video was about the tragedy of GameStop because it really is a tragedy. The Shakespearean term tragedy refers to an unhappy ending, like bankruptcy or financial ruin. GameStop, if it were a ballad, is undeniably a tragedy as we approach the final act where all the efforts and adventures come crashing down. The hero, if that hero were GameStop, loses and dies. The music stops and the curtains close on what was once a prominent and influential company in the lives of almost any and every gamer, but is now just a struggling husk of its former self. That's it for today. If you want to support, there are links down below. Also, this video was produced with hardware from Axial GT. He is honing his skills as a gaming YouTuber, and I would appreciate it greatly if you would support his channel. It's linked down below in the description. On top of that, for those that want to, there is an Upper Echelon Patreon page. It lets me continue all of this without worrying about how to sort out further monetization or whatever YouTube is going to start to push with membership, live streams, and whatever. But also Twitter, merchandise, other social media, etc., etc. But I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.